Okay, we're now recording. Oh,
No point in discussing that.
Go through. Let's get everybody to introduce themselves and their channels. So on our screen, Ange, you're in the top left, so can you start?
Hi, I'm Ange with an E.
Okay. And now,
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Hi, Courtney, America's Jewish Mother. Channel name is the same as the name you see here.
and Sam,
Sam, Paper Not Books.
and lastly, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and my channel is Sadie Reads Again, which I wrote on the screen in case I got it wrong.
That's Scott, and I'm Nelle, and we're gunpowder.fiction.and.plot.
Oh, I didn't think I needed to introduce her.
You don't think so?
No.
Also known as the Queen and King of Tags.
Apparently.
Really?
Because we
Tag royalty.
Wear that crown with pride.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's go into the book. So let's start with some
Did anyone not like it? No.
I think everybody is of the opinion that it was really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
I love Akwaki's writing. They're very consistent with their style and their voice. It's the narrative voice that really carries this book for me.
Yeah.
I like that the way that they're so vague with their language that it allows you to add meaning to yourself. Like you interpret extra meaning that they maybe even didn't intend to put there, but it adds depth.
Book here.
Yeah, they're not the sort of writer that spoon feeds you everything that they exactly want you to think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although there's lots there, like intentionally, not vague, clear cut there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I've got some book club questions up that I thought that might be good to
Let's try them.
discuss. So the opening quote is, "They burned down the market on the day Vivek Oji died. The novel begins in the aftermath of Vivek Oji's death. Despite knowing his death, did they change the experience of the novel for anybody?"
I
think
No,
it
I
adds
don't.
to it. Look at us all formulating our thoughts. But yeah, I think it adds to it. It's a bit like a lot of people have discussed this in the spoiler tag, that sometimes it's okay to know what's coming
yeah.
because then you're anticipating it. And I think I quite like books that start with the ending because I like that anticipation and trying to put all the bits together as you're reading the story.
It's like
Sorry,
there you go, Sam.
I was gonna say that was just like the first chapter. It was like that line was just it. I mean, it was jarring, so it really set a tone for the rest of the book. And I mean, I didn't mind. I don't mind books that start from the ending, and then you kind of want to see what's going on in between, and you want to know more. And I think that's what really brought in the mystery for me. It's like, what happened?
Yeah, I think it does make it like a mystery in that sense, almost if you were reading an actual mystery where someone gets killed close to the beginning and then you're like, okay, well, how did we get there? And then by the end, you find out.
Yeah.
A literary fiction murder mystery.
I don't know if any of you watched the interview that I watched and I posted in Discord, but Okweke actually said that the intention for this book started out as having that structure of the death at the beginning. They said they wanted to echo
Gabriel Marquez. And try that as a structure. So it was sort of a main component of their planning for this book. I definitely think it changes the whole way you look at a story. Yeah. Yeah. Well, because you were, like Courtney said, you're trying to figure out how it happened, but you always assumed worse, then like you always assume the absolute worst, and Equate led you to like some sort of hate crime. I don't know whether that's where my brain went or whether Equate led me there, but I was definitely thinking that there was some sort of like gang violence, hate crime going on. And even when there were clues that completely counteracted, like were anti-intuitive to that, I still dismissed them and went for the hate crime in my head until afterwards I'm like, oh, you kind of just ignored everything that didn't suit your theory.
Yeah, did anybody not think it was a hate crime?
The characters were alluding to it. I thought it was going to be a hate crime.
Yeah.
Thinking
did too.
about the last third, I kind of figured out where it was going, but up until that point, definitely. And I think you're kind of meant to be led down that path. That's the red herring, because it does make, I mean, for me, it made what actually happened even more devastating.
Yeah.
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 I also think that part of what this book is trying to talk about is to show you your own assumption about the lives of queer people, I think, mostly. And our sort of predisposition to queer books being tragic books. And
I mean, it was a tragic book, though.
yeah, but in a like a really specific way,
Yeah.
where everyone dies of violence or AIDS.
Yeah.
Yeah, although I think given sort of what we know about laws in Nigeria, especially concerning homosexuality and things like that, I don't think it's necessarily surprising that any of us just assumed that would be the case.
No, not at all.
Yeah. They need to do better, don't they?
They do. Well, don't we all?
We all do, but yeah, specifically people who
Places that outlaw.
will put you to death for being queer are not cool.
Yeah.
In the second chapter, the narrator tells us that this story could be told through a stack of photographs. Near the end of the book, Sita and the girls visit Kavita, and the stack of photographs tell Vivek's story. How are these stacks of photographs connected? Did you draw any meaning from the use of photographs as opposed to words or physical mementos?
I guess
think
for me,
that-
it's part of being seen, isn't it?
It's about being seen.
Yeah. It's like the moment that I realised that the girl they were talking about who would walk around that they didn't really know was Vivek. I think that was a big thing for me when I put those together. And so seeing it in visual form must have had that same impression for the people who were seeing the transformation of him to her in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if you're like Kavita is, if you're confronted with the photographs that show you who your child actually is, it's not the same thing as finding that what was it, a necklace that Vivek always wore that everyone was trying to figure out where that had gone to. It's not the same as, you know, just getting your hands on the necklace and being like, ah, this is a reminder of my child, right?
But it's kind of like it would be looking at the photographs. They're not like in a sequential order, but it's kind of like these were all the people that knew about Vivek's secret, and this is the reveal of we've been lying to you this whole time. And especially with, was it Osita he wanted all those pictures taken out of him with Vivek, or any pictures of him in the pile. So it's like it's kind of like a confession more than like, I was thinking of it as like the way you read the question is kind of like, oh, well, is it like it's a narrative in its own way, but it's more of like, these are the people that we've been lying to you for months.
I also think it has something to say about the idea of being seen being essential for existence, and this is almost the only proof that Vivek existed in their true identity now that he's dead, because there's no other tactile evidence, I guess, and there's no community consensus as to Vivek's identity.
I don't think even Vivek, I thought that Vivek identifying as he, she, them was quite like it felt like a transition identity, like they're coming to terms and they're like, I'm everything, not nothing. This is not good words. I felt like that this is, felt like it was an exploration, and that their identity was so fluid that aspects of the identity needed to be visual somehow, and that because they identified as 3 different gender pronouns at the same time, that it was easy for Kavita to, at the start of the book, see her son as a son, and other characters to see Vivek as a girl, and to whatever suited them. So it was good to have the photos, especially for Kavita to come to terms with. But I just thought that Vivek's identity along the way sort of showed how blurry it was, rather than definite. It was blurry, if that makes sense.
I think it does make sense, but I think it also is a little bit thinking like a straight person, because
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that because I realized I was doing it when I started speaking.
because you're still trying to put Vivek's identity in terms of the gender binary. You're still trying to describe their gender as something that is comfortable in the male-female spectrum.
Yeah.
But their parents kind of knew something was different about their child, and it was kind of like, just this is exactly this is what you were missing.
Yes.
Yeah, and the photographs also make it impossible to deny, right?
Yeah.
Like if Osita and the girls had just told them about that, Kavita could have been like, no, this is a lie. We're not talking about this anymore.
Yeah.
And I think even in taking the photos, because obviously when the photos were taken, Vivek didn't know what was going to happen. But I think in a sense, that's kind of why the photos were taken as well, because the parents could see that something was going on, but they didn't delve very deeply. And there was almost a sense of denial. So I think for Vivek, having these photos and being able to see them themselves is a way of confirming, yes, I do exist. This is me, no matter what anyone else might try and say about me, or whatever they might tell me is wrong with me.
I think as well as a parent, understanding that children, or your children, regardless of the age, will have parts of themselves that they don't share with you, is a big thing that I've taken from reading this book. And I wonder whether, if Vivek hadn't died, whether his mother would have been as accepting to her. That was something that I really thought about, sort of consciously, even after I finished reading the book, thinking, as my children grow older, will I actually know everything about their lives? And thinking probably not. There'll be parts of them that will be for them, but I hope that they can be as open and honest as they need to be with me. I think that brought up that big question for me as a parent.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I definitely think that there's a different impact this book has for people who have children than for us. There's lots in there that I didn't pick up on because I'm not thinking about it from a parenting aspect until other people have sort of talked about coming from that point of view. And I wonder if there's any part of a Quake that is like communicating to their parents or to queer parents in general of like, this is what you look like.
Absolutely. I think that there are two characters in particular, Kavita and Asita, that try to look after Vivek to the detriment of Vivek in this novel, and those characters don't look the best for doing that.
I'm
There
really
we go.
interested at the end scene, which when we were talking about it in Discord, Scott said was not violent. And
Yeah,
and then we sort of had a little discussion about how that is violence, to try and sort of control someone with your body. That conversation brought up for me, would that scene have played out the same way if Vivek was presenting more masculinely? Would Asita have necessarily tried to like control Vivek with his body if Vivek was, you know, a dude bro?
I don't think
I don't think he would have. I don't think he would have shown any male dominance at that point.
Yeah.
I think it would have been a completely different conversation.
I mean, I guess it actually takes away the motivation, which is to protect the world from seeing, Vivek, from the world's reaction to seeing Vivek feminine. But I think
it brings up, was he protecting himself or was he protecting Vivek?
Yeah, I felt like he was protecting himself more so than Vivek. I mean, he claims that, and I mean, he most certainly was in some way, but I don't know. By the ending, especially since he was like, "Well, I'm running away. I'm starting a new life." He was protecting himself. He's hiding his. I don't know if he hasn't accepted himself yet. He wasn't on the same level as Vivek. Vivek has, you know, he actually, he knew who he was becoming. He knew who he was, and he was evolving. And I don't know. I don't think Asita was really doing anything really that would help Vivek in a way. I don't think that he claims so, but I really don't think that he was being a protector of Vivek. I think it was more so because he didn't want to be seen as, you know, his lover, or he wasn't ready to come out.
Yeah, I agree. I think Asita was just trying to keep Vivek in the closet with him.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about the male-female appearance is that when Vivek and Asita have sex, you see it through Asita's eyes, and Asita says that Vivek is actually strong and is stronger than me. And like when you're trying to physically control somebody, you're trying to physically control them because they're weaker than you. So it was interesting that Asita already knew that Vivek is stronger than him, and that it was almost like it was a futile attempt to control him. It was to control her, a futile attempt to conceal her identity.
But does that show the difference in the persona? If you're presenting as a male persona and you're physically stronger, but as soon as it was a female persona, the perception changed that a female would be weaker, for want of a better term in any situation.
Or maybe
So I didn't hear what you said, sorry.
or maybe more compliant.
Yeah. So the perception of what you would be as a male compared to a female, regardless of your physicality.
So Asita is definitely assuming gender roles that Vivek is not.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, because I think if we looked at it, if Vivek was walking towards the market, the fire, the riots, but he was in his male presenting self, would Osita even have gone after him to get him to turn around?
Not at
And
all.
if he had, would he have used physical force if Vivek had still refused in the same? Well, I don't know if physical force is right. I don't think it was intentional, but would he have just been like, well, do whatever you want to do, I'm getting out of here? And I think if he's seeing Vivek through the filter of society and seeing Vivek in female presenting self, then his behavior towards him changes, because yes, he knows that Vivek is stronger than him, but as soon as he sees Vivek as a female, his behavior totally doesn't act in accordance with that belief.
Right.
I think they're two very interesting characters. They're both like, I guess, speciously going through a similar sort of identity discovery, but Vivek is all peace, love, among beings, and he's really surrounded by love. Even his parents, who he's not fully revealed himself to, are protecting him from the conversion therapy of his aunt, and like he's really loved. And then Asita is this angry turmoil of a mess, and I sort of wonder what we're supposed to get from that.
Is Vivek more open with their identity and who they are because their parents are more loving than Asita's parents, who, like, if Asita was in Vivek's position, would have been beaten at a church regularly by
I don't know if that's necessarily more loving, but more accepting maybe.
more accepting. Vivek had the space to blossom into who they were that Asita didn't have.
Maybe.
I think Vivek is just more confident than Osita.
Yeah.
Really, like, all it was.
And I guess Asita's dealing with something slightly different, because I assume from the reading that he's fairly secure in his gender identity, but it's his sexual identity that he is struggling with and wants to hide.
And I guess,
Yeah.
I guess for a lot of people that's a more private thing. Like, it's not necessarily like, for a lot of people, gender is something you wear on the outside day to day. It's just how you present everywhere you go, whereas your sexuality actually can be something that you keep behind closed doors.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is a different journey.
And even your partner doesn't, like, because you might have a heterosexual relationship and still be on the queer spectrum quite easily. Like, that's super common. But yeah, it's really easy to hide. But gender is not. Yeah.
Or even just not make a thing of, like, not necessarily specifically be secretive, but just not have it be at the forefront of what you do.
Yeah. And it was like, I was thinking about how you would describe yourself and whether you would put your sexuality in a description or not. And a lot of people wouldn't, but because it's not important, like, it's not the most important thing about them, but you can always see. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I had that like support network, because Vivek had his friends, and although Asita was part of that group, it wasn't in the same way. And so they'd really supported Vivek in him being able to express his gender. But Asita didn't really have anyone apart from Vivek to help him express his sexuality and be comfortable with that.
I definitely got all the feels from the friendship group. It really reminded me of like my teenage experience of sort of finding a bit of community among strange teenagers. And that the first time you find your own people and the first time you choose people, I really enjoyed that aspect of the book. It made me really happy.
Yeah, I think as a parent, that's when you sort of realise that once your kids become a certain age, you really don't know anything about them unless they specifically express that to you. You can't assume anything about your children. Even my 11-year-old, I wouldn't now sort of believe that I know everything that goes on in her world, because she's got such a tight friendship group that I'm not part of.
11 is so grown up now too.
Yeah.
All right, there's a last question here. Shall we move on?
Yeah.
As Vivek grows more uncomfortable with his family at home, he finds himself solace with the daughter of the Niger wives. What actions do the girls take to make Vivek feel comfortable and secure? If a biological family is unable to accept a child, can friendships be a sufficient replacement? This is quite a good question considering what the topic was just a second ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a novel that has explicitly queer themes. So of course, it's going to put forth this idea about chosen family, which is so important to a lot of queer people.
Chosen family.
Yeah, they were each other's safe space. And that's what I felt. It was cute.
I think it points out that humans need connections, that those connections don't always have to be the same as everybody else. Like some people have good relationships with their parents, some people have poor relationships with their parents, but everybody needs
Some kind
connection,
of
and it doesn't matter so much where it comes from as long as you have that and it's supportive.
I also really liked that it wasn't centered around a romantic connection as much. Like there was obviously the romance there, but that was not core to Vivek's support, and I appreciated that.
I think that's something that I really admire from like the queer culture. Something that I wish, like, it's something that I envy, that it's not love focused, it's not sex focused, that sort of friendship. It can just be friends, it can just be people you like.
Yeah.
And that's lovely.
It did remind me of being in school in the late 80s, because that's how old I am. And being in that group of girls who protected the boys who weren't the masculine boys, who weren't the ones who were playing football and being all of that stuff, but had really good friendships with them. And then in later years, as you grow and you go back to school reunions and stuff, it's that sort of friendships where they'll say, oh yeah, I always remember that, you just had my back all the way through. And that, I think it reminded me of being sort of those sort of girls, like, yeah, just back off, you know what I mean? Just let anybody be who they want to be. They don't have to be like you, because you're probably a bit toxic, to be honest. But so having that safe environment, and it was in a way the girls who were that battle line for people who were needing to express being, I don't like using the word different, but sort of not within what people were expecting of the working class lads in the northeast of England.
Or anywhere, we you know, even.
But I think I thankfully come from a family who are very open to everybody, regardless. My mum and dad, tolerance and understanding of everybody, regardless, was a big thing in our house. So just everybody was welcome, no questions asked or what. It's just, and everybody was accepted for who they were. So I grew up in that sort of background.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's easy to accept other people's children sometimes as well, whereas some parents confronted with the same things from their own children may not be quite the same way.
Yeah, and that
I don't-
actually goes back to Ange's question from before about whether Kavita would have been as accepting of Vivek if she had found out all this stuff before, I mean, you know, prior to Vivek's death. What do other people think?
I think that the answer to that is sad. I think I don't think she was really ready. I think that she was still struggling with the length of his hair. Like, I think that his transition was way too fast for her, and I feel that he was like gaining momentum and finding himself and getting excited about that. But still protect, like I felt like he was being parental in protecting her from it.
I think Kavita was like forced to love Vivek after Vivek dies because she can't fix anything with their relationship. It is what it is now. And if she can't accept her son as a woman, then she can never accept her son. So she has to be good with it now. But if Vivek was still living, she could have taken a decade to accept Vivek, and they could have had a crap relationship for a decade, and it might have blossomed after that, or it might have been toxic enough to kill it. But she was really forced to accept Vivek because of his death. So
I think it was interesting how she reacted when the aunt took him to church and they sort of tried to do the, we'll get the evil spirit out of you. She became a very protective mother at that point, but not to the point where she accepted why they were doing that. She didn't seem to accept what the devil as they perceived it to be, or the demon they perceived it to be, was. It was quite sort of, she was half there, as in, that's my child, don't do that to my child, but still not accepting enough to understand Vivek's position in that. So it was sort of a halfway step, if you can see. She was like half in, like that's my child, but not fully invested in Vivek as a person in transitioning.
Yeah.
That's what I got when I was sort of reading through that part.
I kind of, excuse me, I kind of flip-flopped in that I think that she would have been accepting, and then I'm like, oh no, I don't know if he'd lived, I don't know if she would have been so accepting. But it was really when she found out his chosen name, because it kind of clicked with her, and she's like, oh yeah, this was meant to be. So
Yeah,
in a way, I don't know how she would have reacted, but
I was just going to say, it's the sort of went back to sort of folklore and their traditions of the reason that Vivek is like this is because he's actually the spirit of a female,
yeah,
reincarnated, and that then made sense to her.
Yeah.
So it was,
and that's, but it's like if Vivek had survived,
yeah,
would
she have thought the
clicked with
same
her?
thing?
Yeah, that's what the one thing that it really gets me. It's like, was Vivek's death necessary for her to accept it? But at the same time, it's that that piece of folklore that's, it's like, I think that she would have come around. It would have been immediate. It wouldn't have been like a, wait a minute, wait, what was his name? What name did he choose?
Yeah.
So I think it would have been something she came around to.
I really like the folklore, like the aspect of that, because it like harked back to what Maisie was doing in Freshwater with mental health. But this time, the Quakey Maisie has done it with a different aspect of life, and that blending of folklore into the understanding of how the world works. It's something that is a theme through their work that is quite interesting.
I definitely think that like the de-Westernization of how we consider the explanation for these things is part of their agenda. I think, and that holds a lot for me. Like I think that's really interesting.
I watched that video that you'd recommended, the interview with Ekweke, and they mentioned that one of the criticisms that they got from the book was, why were they, what about the incest? Why were they cousins? Did they have to be cousins? And they mentioned like, yeah, that happens all the time. And it's like, it's a common thing. It's not something that's quite unusual. You don't talk about it, but there's a lot of cousins that are hooking up. And it was just something that, I mean, we don't think about that in the West, in their Western civilization either, but it's like, you know what? Yeah, I think they're right.
It seems like a weird criticism too, especially because like so many Victorian and other novels from that time period have to do with cousins marrying each other.
I'm English. We've got cousins marrying,
Yeah.
servants marrying.
More shocking to marry your servant than it is to marry your cousin.
Exactly.
I read a Jared Diamond non-fiction book last year, and he said that because of how you're raised and how attraction forms in your brain, you're actually most likely to be attracted to your cousin than anybody else in the world.
Has nobody ever studied the British royal family? Do they not know how it works?
While I was reading that, it didn't really dawn on me that they were cousins. I mean, I knew they were cousins, but I had just read, it was one of the books that I was judging by, for the booktube prize award thing. But it was, what book was it? It's a book about Ebola, but they were talking about all the tribes, and that people would always refer to one another, whether or not they were related. They would refer to each other as like auntie or an uncle. And it was just like a family thing. So it didn't dawn on me that, oh, well, they're literally related. So it's like,
Sarah,
oh.
I bet you've got loads of aunties and uncles who you're not blood related to.
Other what?
In Scotland. It happens here in the UK all the time. We've got aunties and uncles and all kinds that we're not related to. Yeah,
but it just, and I mean, we do that too, but it's just like your friends. But it's like, they actually like, it didn't dawn on me until it was mentioned in that video. It's like, oh yeah, they're cousins, aren't they? They were literally cousins.
Does that say more about us than other people?
No, it was fine.
No comment.
Yeah, I think to begin with, I think we're given a glimpse earlier on in the book. Is there a scene where it must be, you find out later in the book, it must be when Vivek's revealing himself in his female presenting form to Azita. But when I was reading it the first time, I was very aware they were cousins, and I felt a bit icky. But actually, as the book went on, I kind of forgot that they were cousins.
Yeah.
I guess because there were so many other important things happening.
I also think their like romance was actually quite natural. Like they clearly had an actual connection, and I've seen much more toxic portrayals of romantic relationships that aren't between cousins that make me way more uncomfortable than you know. I think for the most part they actually were kind to each other, and it wasn't a big ugly mess.
It was almost like that teenage thing where you have a group of friends and sort of everybody
Dates everybody.
And it was like, that was my ex 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, there was definitely a bit of that going on.
Yeah, I thought that was accurate.
I think it probably showed more about how safe they felt with each other in their sexuality, that they had that underlying trust with each other. And so it sort of came from that quite naturally. As Nelle was saying, that it didn't seem sort of forced or whatever, that you could believe in that because of the environment that they were in.
Well, also, I think Amezi just did a really good job of building scenes where there was clearly sexual tension building between them, so that then when it finally happened, I was like, okay, I was not just imagining that the whole time.
I wasn't having some kind of weird cousin fetish for no reason. I also think it's like a really modern look at sex. Like, I think there was no sort of shame attached to the fact that there was sexual encounters between these friends for different purposes, and like for different, there was like a grief sexual encounter, and do you know what I mean? Like, there was, romance wasn't the only reason for sex, and it wasn't the only place for sex within like a committed one-on-one relationship. And I think that was really I guess much closer to my idea of how sex works in today's society than a lot of books are able to keep up with.
We got ghost sex too.
Ghost. Yeah.
There was a year when it's like every other book I would read is like, there's ghost sex in this book.
How does that even work?
I thought you said goat. I thought you said goat sex.
I forgot that bit.
And I was like, what books have you been reading?
Ghosts, like Phantom. I don't think I've ever read any goat sex.
You sure?
Probably good.
I just don't want to publicly admit.
I'm like,
You need to find some.
yeah.
Your challenge is.
Would you have a recommendation?
Oh my god.
Who's the goat?
Well, that's cute.
Who writes that goat?
Salman Rushdie
Salman Rushdie.
sodomizes the goat in one of his.
Oh Jesus! Oh yeah.
You should cut this. You should cut this part out of the Zoom chat, by the way.
Yeah, that's all finished. We're now just into the after party.
Okay, I can stop recording now. I think we've got a good discussion here.
Yeah.
And we can just chat and talk about goat sex if we like.